Excellent. So, welcome to Good Business Colorado's Level Up Academy. So we're here with René DeAnda. Is that how you say that your last name?
Yes.
And she's going to talk with us. Her talk is "Me and My Degree: Undergraduate Students of All Ages." So get ready to learn. We've got the recording going. All right. And so, without further ado, here's René. I'm just going to manually turn the computer around.
That's great.
That's how you're grabbing here.
Okay. All right. Hello, and thank you for coming. So my name is René DeAnda, and I'm the founder of, it's actually a company called InnerstandU, and then an offshoot of that is Me and My Degree, because I think education is a big part of understanding yourself too. So, and that all stemmed from me being an academic advisor for like 20 years at a private university here in Denver, Colorado. There I am. And my big thing is educating people on what they don't know. So everybody thinks they know how to go to school because they did it for 12 years. They went to school and they went there every day and they know how to go to school. But college is different. And so they expect you to know things when you get there that you just don't know. And so people think they know, they expect you to know, but people don't know. So that's what I'm here to tell people, is what things that they don't know. And when you learn the things that you don't know, it can save you a lot of money and a lot of time. So I have a horror story that I would like to share with you. And as I walk through that story, I can tell you what could have been different and what could have made it better and what could have saved me like $25,000 and a lot of time. So that's my big message to people, is just how to manage their way through their undergraduate degree. And my target audience is, any undergraduate student, but mostly undergraduate students that are adults coming back to school. Veterans, single parents, it doesn't matter. If you're an adult and you're coming back to school, you need to hear what I have to say. And if you are a first generation student at any age, you should hear what I have to say as well. But my main audience is those who don't have that support system to tell them when to pay attention to something, a policy or whatever it might be. So if you can just imagine a first generation student or an adult coming back to school and they just want to get out of class. So they tell the instructor, I'm dropping this class. That's all they know, is that I'm dropping this class. I'm telling the instructor that I'm dropping this class. And then 15 weeks later, they have an F because they thought they dropped the class by telling the instructor, whereas they didn't, because they didn't know the policy. And a lot of times, these people, because they think they know what they're doing, they don't connect with their advisor right away. And then that's where they make mistakes and they get the F and they have to pay that bill. And then they have to do something about that F later on. So I'm going to start and tell you my story, and maybe you guys can relate. Has anybody here gone to college? Everybody's gone to college. That's wonderful. Can I just ask real quick about did you connect with your advisors? Is there anybody who didn't connect with their advisors?
I connected right away.
Wonderful.
My dad didn't know, so he was adamant about meeting somebody that did.
Wonderful. And anybody else?
Day one, I was in the house.
Wonderful.
I was intimidated, so I needed help.
That's great. That's great.
No, I didn't at all. No, well, let me rephrase. I did, but it was late and not useful. So I was a first generation college student. I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And when I was in school, I had the pamphlet of classes that were sorted by major, and then you literally called into a phone line to register for classes.
Uh-huh.
And then if you didn't get the one class, you had to scratch the whole thing, disenroll from everything, and then start over.
Oh, geez.
Right. So it was hard. It was frustrating. I didn't know where to turn. And that is part of the reason why my degree took 6 years as opposed to 4.
Yep.
I graduated with one class away from about 3 different minors. So if that's any indication of wasted credits,
yes,
equaling wasted money
and time.
Yep. And and when I did get an academic advisor, I got bad advice. Take this class, it'll count towards your major. Oops, no, sorry, it didn't. And now you got to take something else.
Yes.
And there was no real relationship or trust there because of it.
Yes.
And so coming back for my master's, I knew better. But I also came back from my master's, 15, almost 20 years later.
Yes.
Brain is more developed, and I know more than what I did when I was an 18-year-old person.
Absolutely.
And so, but no, my first experience with a counselor was not a positive.
And so I would like to speak to that as well. And that's why I created this class, is because so many people have these negative experiences with their advisor. I had asked the question on the Whova app, what was your advising experience like and whatnot? And Sydney actually posted on there and answered the question, and she had a horrible experience with her advisor. Her advisor, she wanted to know how to replace a bad grade. And her advisor was like, why do you want to replace it? D's get degrees. And it's like, who says that? That's an advisor. But it happens. And so, she kind of learned to self-advocate and to keep track of her own records, and which turned out to be really useful for her later, because she ended up having to show all her records in order to get her degree, because her advisor wasn't keeping track of anything. So that's one of the reasons. There's so many reasons that I developed this class, because people just need to know. They need to know how to self-advocate and what to look for and what a degree plan is. So with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, and I appreciate you sharing your stories, because it just speaks to the point that this is needed. It's a needed service. So, okay. So I started my journey right out of high school. I went to school in a small town, Salida, Colorado, and there weren't colleges around. And so I was in the business track in high school. So I didn't have any college prep, or nobody talked to me about college or anything. So, but I was really good at the business stuff. So I picked Barnes Business College, and they sent out a guy, admissions rep, all the way 3 hours from Denver. And he came to the house, and he was very cheerful and everything. And we talked, and I ended up signing up for Barnes Business College. Well, somebody had told me to be sure to ask the question if my credits if the credits that I earned from Barnes Business College would transfer then to a 4-year college, should I want to go on to get a 4-year degree. So my 17-year-old self asked the question, and he said, oh, absolutely. So I said, okay. So I signed on the bottom line, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with this college or not, but they were very expensive, and I could have used that money much more wisely had I known better. So I signed the bottom line. I spent the next 2 years at Barnes Business College, and they basically handed me a scripted set of classes. It was kind of like a cohort. And for those of you who don't know what a cohort is, it's where you go through all your classes with the same set of people. And so you just go down the list and check them off as you go. So I did that, and it was a very rigorous program. And I got all the way to the end, and I had already obtained the job that I wanted. I wanted to be an executive secretary, and because that's what my mom did. And so again, that was another mistake, because I was just doing what my mom did, and nobody advised me any different. So what happened, I got to that last class, and they wanted you to do an unpaid internship for almost the entire semester. And it was during business hours. And I had already had the paying job that I went there to get. So I didn't do that last piece, because I couldn't quit my job to do the internship because it paid the rent. So I never got the piece of paper from Barnes Business College. I just got 2 years worth of credits, which I thought was fantastic, because I have what I need. If I want to go on, I have what I need. I could just finish out somewhere else. So tuition at that time averaged, for 2 years, it was about $5,000. At Barnes Business College, it was about $7,500. So that was the difference there. So that little mistake cost me right off the top. Then I got out of school and I just worked and did my thing. Hello. So then I decided to go back to school. So I went to UNC, and I had an advisor she was a faculty advisor. So there's professional advisors and there's faculty advisors. Professional advisors are there all day, every day at their desk, helping students as an advisor. And faculty advisors teach during the day. And when they're on break, they advise. And so they will post on their door advising hours. So I went to her office during advising hours, and she was very busy. And she basically signed a piece of paper that was blank and handed it to me and said, fill this out and go get yourself registered. I said, okay. So I went and looked at the program, and I found all kinds of classes that looked really interesting. And one of the classes was physiological psychology. And it sounded fantastic. It was like, this is going to be a great class. So I went to the class, loved the class. I did my best to do all the homework, and I attended every session. Well, it had prerequisites, and I really wasn't familiar with prerequisites, and I didn't really know what that meant. And one of the prerequisites was statistics. I didn't have statistics. And it was a 400 level class, and I was a freshman. And at this time, because I was going for something different, I didn't even think about getting those credits transferred over yet. I was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. So I took the class. I got an F. It was the best F I ever got. But I ended up leaving that institution and that year, or right after that year. And so I never had the opportunity to retake that class and to replace that F. So it's still sitting there. So that was a mistake. And another thing that happened while I was there, I was in a journalism class because that was one of the classes I thought was really interesting. And I thought I had been thinking about becoming a journalist because I like to investigate things. And so I had an instructor, and his name was John Seelmeyer, and he was awesome. And he advised me against becoming a journalist because he said, you're really good at this, but you're going to hate your job because everything is scripted these days. And you're the type of person that's not going to want to read the script. You're going to want to dig deeper and get the true story. So he said, you're going to hate it. And I thought that was very, very good advice. I still think it was very good advice because I would have hated that job. So the best advice I received there was from an instructor. One of the other things that happened there, I just have to share this too, is when I did take statistics, because I finally was like, well, I have to take statistics, obviously, because these classes require statistics. Mm-hmm. So I tried to take statistics, and it was in this huge auditorium, and they were trying to teach like 300 of us at a time. And this was pre-PowerPoint, and we had the overheads, and this instructor wrote all the formulas on one overhead, and he had a big stick, and he projected this up onto the wall, and he would say, when in this situation, you use this formula, and he would point with this big stick, and it would just kind of look like he was pointing to the air. It was like, okay. And so I ended up taking it 3 times, failing it 3 times while I was there. I know it sounds like I just failed everything, but I didn't. No, but I did fail statistics. These are the lowlights. But I didn't understand about the impact of just not going to class and just saying, okay, I'm not going to that class anymore. So I ended up with an F in there. And when I would go to visit him, he would have this long line. And basically, he just told everybody, just get out of the class. So I just kind of stopped going to the class. And so I did this 3 times. So I ended up with 3 Fs, and one replacing the other. And I left there with those 2 Fs, the one for statistics and the one for physiological psych on my transcript. And like I said, they're pretty much still there. So then I decided I don't want to go to college anymore. I'm just going to work. So I went to work for a company called CDSI, and it was a computer company, and I was a technical writer. So I was making good money. I was making decent money. And then all of a sudden, I started editing my boss's work. And I said, I want a raise. And because of this, right? And I was like, well, I should have a raise. If you're not going to promote me, give me a raise. And they said, we can't give you a raise because you're topped out. So they said, you have to go get a bachelor's degree and then come back. And then we can promote you or give you a raise or whatever. So that was very frustrating. So that's when I went back to college. I had a friend that worked there, and he said, if you go to this college, they have an opening for a secretary, and if you work there, they'll help pay your tuition. So I said, okay. So I went there, and it was at Regis University, and sure enough, they helped with the tuition, and so I started my career there, and I started as a traditional student because I wanted to go into psychology, all because of that class in the very, very beginning. So I wanted to go for psychology, and I went for psych, and I was going to class. They would release me during the day to go do my classes, and a couple things happened. So one, I wasn't the right age. I didn't have an advisor that I knew of. Nobody ever said, this is your advisor. And once again, it was like, I know how to go to school, right? When you're a kid, you just know everything. So I didn't have the advisor, and I wasn't the right age. So I was in my early to mid 20s, and everybody else was 18 to 22. So we didn't have the same lifestyles. I lived on my own. I paid rent and things of that nature. I lived off campus, and the topic of the conversation was always about Friday night, whether it was the last Friday night or the next Friday night. And I wasn't really into that. I was busy doing adulting. And so I didn't mesh with the kids I was going to school with. So then I decided to switch to the adult program, because they also had an adult program, which happened at night. So I switched to the adult program. So this is when I started to figure out things weren't going to transfer, because I said, okay, the psych classes that I was taking, they didn't line up with the adult program psych classes. So it was like I would have to take all this stuff over again, and it just wasn't meshing. So I said, okay.
Same school.
Same school.
Oh.
Yeah, it was kind of strange. So I said, all right, I'm going to switch and go into business, because that's the fastest way I can get this done, because I already have all these classes. I already have a bunch of these classes done. So I switched to the business program. And that's when I found out that none of my classes from Barnes Business College would transfer. And I'm talking about classes like Accounting 1 and 2, Business Finance, Management, Marketing, Macro, Micro, and then there was also like English and Math and stuff like that. But they didn't transfer. So I started taking these classes again, right? Because I had to if I was going to do their business program. Right. So that's when I found out that the other degree just wasn't going to come over at all. They did transfer the technical credits, but that was keyboarding, typing, 10 key, and things like that. It was the hands-on type stuff. It wasn't the academic classes. And they sat in general electives, which I didn't really need because I already had stuff in general electives. So that was another piece that didn't happen. So then I decided, well, I wanted to switch jobs and move to a different department. And I decided I'm going to go work in this testing center. Well, when I thought of testing, I worked in the nursing department. So when I thought of testing, the nurses have to take certain tests and stuff. And that's what my brain did with that. Well, when I got there, these exams were for credit. They were CLEP and Dante's exams at the time. They're called DSST exams. But they were for credit, like 3 credits, anywhere between 3 and 12 credits for one exam. And the cost of the exam was like $120. And I was like, what are you talking about? And this was my job to know all this. So I learned very quickly that these exams existed, and they were multiple choice, and you passed at 70% and you could get these credits. And I was like, are you kidding me? Because they offered exams in English, math, speech, accounting 1 and 2, business finance, management, marketing, and macro and micro.
So they had to get their share of the money.
So but they were paying for me to be there. I mean, they were paying my tuition. Nobody told me I could test out of these classes.
How much was it to test out?
If I
estimated dollars to take those tests.
like $120 a test, and so that's 10 classes.
Compared to thousands for class.
Thousands for class, yes. So it came up to about $18,000 that I could have saved. And not so much the money, but it was the time at the time, because I retook all of those classes, and some of them I took in the 15-week class, and some of them I took in the 8-week class because it was in the adult program. But either way, I spent at least a year retaking stuff that I didn't have to retake. So, and if you think about it, the earning potential was kicked down the road too, because I could have been earning sooner had I tested. So then there's that money too. So that's when I learned about testing out. And that's when I started this mission. Because I was like, I don't want people to go through the same thing that I did and just waste all this money. So that's why my big message is to educate people on what they don't know, what they think they know, but they don't know. And then a couple other things happened too. When I ended up going for my master's degree because I wanted to be an academic advisor. Like I said, I was on a mission. Then I was on a mission. I was like, I'm going to be an advisor and I'm going to tell everybody. And I did. But one of the things that happened when I was in my master's program, I had 3 classes left, and we did this assessment. And I learned about learning styles. I had no idea there was learning styles. I didn't even know what that meant. The whole time, I knew there was learning styles, but I didn't know there was an assessment for learning styles. Let's put it that way. So I found out the whole time I thought I was a visual learner because I liked bright colors and sticky notes and highlighters. And, I highlighted everything. And so I was just certain I was a visual learner. Well, as it turns out, I'm not a visual learner. I'm an auditory learner. And I have to hear things. I have to hear them, whether it's my own voice or somebody else's voice, it doesn't matter. I just have to hear it out loud to process it, which explains why when I would get frustrated, when I would read silently to myself, and I would read it and read it and read it, like the same paragraph over and over and over, and it just never made any sense. And then I would finally be like, this is what this paragraph says. And I would read it out loud. And, I would actually point word to word to word and read it out loud. And then I would get it like the first time. I didn't realize it was because I was hearing it. I thought it was because I was frustrated enough and I was focused enough that I was finally getting it. But the reason I was getting it was because I was finally hearing it for the first time. So that would have been really nice to know, like in the 8th grade. It would have changed my whole career, or at least at the beginning of my bachelor's degree, right? So that was learning styles. And then also study skills. Who knew? Who knew there was such a thing as study skills? I didn't even know there was such a thing as study skills. They teach time management. They teach you note taking. I was always taught, I was never taught how to take notes. I always thought that you took notes left to right, in your composition book. You just write everything that's being said left to right. And then I would never look at it again. Well, I finally learned, I don't know if you can see this, but I finally learned to mind map. And that was amazing for me. And I would get things instantly instead of, having to stress about reading all these notes again. And I would make flashcards, and they never worked for me. There's just different things that they would say, well, do this and do that. And none of it ever worked for me. So until I found out what did work for me, and it was like, well, if I do this, that kind of works, but that's not how everybody else does it. So, don't do that. And then I finally learned, there's only one you, and you do things the way you do things, and that's okay. So it took a long time for me to figure that out. So there's all of those things. And the other things, so all in all, I did all these things, and it took a long time. It took me 7 years to get my bachelor's degree because I was working and whatnot. And then I went back for my master's degree, and that was another 5 years on top of that, because at that time I had a toddler at home. So just trying to get all of that done, and so that I could become the academic advisor that I wanted to be. So that's kind of my story. But before I go on, are there any questions or shared experiences.
I would love to know where you're an academic advisor. Do you run your own firm to do advising, or?
So I retired from Regis University, and I now have a business called Me and My Degree. And I'm just finishing up a class that I'm creating called Studenting 101. And it has all of the things. It has terminology, it has policy, it has like various ways you can earn credit. You know, people don't realize that they have credit. And if you're in the military, you have credit. If you have a DD 214, you already have credit. You may have taken training that's attached to credit and not know it. A lot of times they take leadership training and things of that nature, and they don't realize that it's actually being taught through a university. Oftentimes it's University of Maryland, and there's credit attached to that. And so they'll go back to school years later and they'll take all those classes again, or they'll take, those classes could sit either in the general elective bucket, or they could sit in the core, and sometimes even in the major. So just depending on what you have. A lot of people have professional development credit, and they don't realize that that's credit that can be on their transcript. Some people have licenses, like a pilot's license, scuba diving licenses, real estate type stuff, or any insurance licenses. Some of that credit, some of those things are attached to credit. They have what they call this ACE handbook. And I don't know if you've ever heard of ACE accreditation, but there's this handbook, and it's about this thing. Now it's probably digital. They probably don't print it anymore. But it works really strangely because you have to pay to be in that book, for one thing. So if the economy takes a downturn, they may not pay that year to be in that book. So then that wouldn't be credited. Like if you have it, it may not work on your transcript. But some years they do pay for it. And so that credit would be transferable, is what I'm trying to say. So there's a lot of things to consider. Some people have AP credit on their transcripts from high school. Some people take high school, college level classes in high school and don't realize that it's transferable. And then there's the testing. And there's also something called portfolio. So if you do something that, like, say, if you're a real estate agent and you want credit for that, but there's no real class to go get it, and you already have the knowledge and you don't want to repeat all that, you can write a portfolio sometimes, depending on where you're at and what they allow. But I know my institution did that, and you could write these, they were really thick portfolios, and it was just full of supporting documentation. Here's what I learned. Here's how I learned it. Here's how I applied it. That type of thing. So a lot of essay writing, but some of those were worth 3 to 20 credits. And so you would pay to write this, great big portfolio, but you would get credit for it. And sometimes they're transferable and sometimes they're not. So like if you write a portfolio at one institution, you want to be sure that it's transferable to the next institution. And then there's one thing that I harp on a lot, and I want to say here, and that is, if you're transferring to another school, that you want find out the school you want to go to, and then get all your transcripts sent from institution A to institution B. Don't go get them and hold them in your hand. Don't have them sent to you. Go do it online and pay for the service and have them sent directly to your new institution's registrar's office. And then that will be considered official. And then you won't have to pay for them again, because so many people would show up with that stack and have to pay for them all again.
Yeah. Your personal story resonates with me because my educational career, to start with, whether you're a young person going into secondary education for the first time, or if you're a grown person, an adult going back to better yourself.
Yes.
It resonates with me because there's mistakes made. And during my academic career, during your academic career, those mistakes cost money and it costs time.
Yes.
It also costs, like you said, delay to your career, to earning an income related to that degree.
Yep.
But it also costs that emotional energy that you have to rebuild constantly to just keep going.
Yes.
And so really interested in hearing more about your service and the way that you help to combat or be proactive about avoiding some of those, so that folks can get their education and move on to their career. And applicability and putting a degree to work is a whole other thing, maybe, but would love to hear more about how your business, your organization helps to avoid some of those experiences.
So the class walks you through, like career development is in the very beginning. It's not in your junior year, it's in the beginning. And we start with the career development and doing some assessment type stuff, and then figuring out from there what I might like to do, and then taking that forward into watching some day in the life of videos, where you can say, oh, I want to be a patient advocate, and then watch videos on what they do all day. And then you say, oh, no, I really don't want to do that. Or, yeah, that looks great. And then that leads to informational interviews. And then you look for institutions and find that educational pathway that you might want to go down. Because that way, there's not this huge swing later from, you might start down like a psych path, and then later, go down accounting. So, it's like a huge swing. It'll help you to avoid that, at least that huge swing. You might have little detours, but it won't be this huge overarching swing that costs you a lot of time and money. Changing your major in your junior year is not advisable. So, right? Yes, here too. So,
I am very fortunate. As I sit here and listen to this, I just went to a community college because I was kind of like Stephen Jobs. Screw this. I got this. I'm an entrepreneur. I just need the basics. Yeah. But then I had a child, my second child. Has anybody seen the Big Bang Theory?
Yes.
I have Sheldon's twin.
Oh.
You can say, oh, be careful what you wish for. Because I always said I want him really smart and things like that. I had to put him in a charter school because he questioned public school so much. He kept correcting the teacher's grammar. Teachers don't like that. So I kept trying to say that, just hold the shit inside. But he then is in this charter school in Thornton, and they decide they're going to work with Front Range Community College, and they have a person like you. They don't now. And I'm sitting here going, that's what these charter schools do, is work with community colleges, and they need your info going into that. I'm very fortunate. I'm sitting here, I want to call this principal of the school and go, thank you, Chris. You knew what you were doing, and I don't even know the kind of help you gave us. But my kid is at Denver University, but he graduated high school with 2 associate's degrees. Wow. One in music and one in business, which he's applying, and everything transfers.
Yes.
So I feel so grateful that somebody was doing it right, and I'm going to make sure you stay in touch. You need to be to these schools. They need you.
Yes.
And to that point, I graduated high school in 90. Back then, when you went to see a school counselor, it was because you were in trouble. It wasn't about college planning or academic coursework. There's nothing about that. And so I applied to schools in December, hoping that I get accepted in time for, the start of the school semester that January, February.
That's great. Yeah, January.
And so I was like, I don't know. And so when I got there, I went into business administration, because when you don't know what you're going to do,
that's what you do.
Business administration. And then in my junior year, I discovered that's not what I really want to do. And so that previous 2 years worth of credits, gone. Oh. And so then I started over on a social work degree, which is completely opposite, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Totally opposite. And that's what I turned into 15.
One, you potentially have money, one you don't. I shouldn't say that.
And here's the kicker. I was a first generation student. I never knew there was financial incentive for that until the end of my senior year. Never knew. And so I wasted, because I didn't have a good support system around me, I wasted time.
Yes.
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to take tests.
Yeah.
My parents they were proud of my academic success and really put importance on it, but they couldn't help.
Yeah.
And so I wasted time. I wasted money. And it was just kind of this frustrating experience that I couldn't really sort through and figure out until I was an adult. So that's why I'm like, I wish there was more Renees back when I was.
Yeah. And like the TRIO program, you could have totally capitalized on the TRIO program, which has, it started out with 3 programs under it. Now there's 8. And, people just don't know that it exists. And
I was smart enough to do all the work.
Oh, yeah.
I could have probably
absolutely
quite a bit of things.
Absolutely. But you didn't know. Yeah. And nobody knows.
College has people like you too, women that I just said.
Yeah.
This child went in when they came for a tour with his class in 7th grade, and he snuck off and took my credit cards for emergency and took all those acupuncture tests. We presented out of middle school, high school, and first year of college.
Yep.
So that was where they offered us money. I didn't know that smart kids get money when they test.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Yep. Articulation agreements. Colleges have articulation agreements like Front Range and Red Rocks and Denver Community College, and all the community colleges have articulation agreements with the 4-year institutions so that you can just bridge right over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask 2 more questions?
Of course.
So if I was a parent wanting to, whether I had experience with college, universities, or my child was a first-time student, how would I reach out to you, and what would that engagement look like?
So I have a website, meandmydegree.com, and there is an opportunity to do, I think it's, I want to say an hour and a half advising session, like just to help plot things, is on there as a service. And then the class will be offered on there. And I wanted to have it done for today. I worked so hard to try to get it up for today, but it's so close. So I would say that it should be up within the next month. meandmydegree.com.
And if I was an adult looking to add a degree to my professional, my resume, would that engagement look different, or how would that look?
It would look the same. It would look the same because I meet you where you are. So, the advice may be different because you are an adult and you may have credits in your pocket you don't know about. And we'll find those and then move on from there. And it just may be a little bit not as structured maybe as for somebody who's 18 coming in. But mostly it's just to inform people of what's out there and how to move through with grace and ease instead of just kind of blindly.
And are you a support ongoing, or is it just a 1-time, 2-time kind of engagement work? Will you work with somebody throughout their college career to make sure that it's on pace? And
that can be arranged. So we would just meet one-on-one and see what the needs are. And I have done that before. And it just depends on the relationship that the student wants to, because sometimes they just want somebody to talk to. And then other times they want that guidance. So if it's the guidance they want, then yes, I'm available for that. But just somebody to talk to, it's more of a counselor that they're seeking instead of an advisor.
Awesome. And an extra thanks to you, René, for putting this together and telling us your story.
Yeah.
I think you can help.
It was a pleasure. Thank you all for
This
coming.
stuff is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even think about it or know that it's there. Which is one of those
big life expenses.